Welcome to the SailPoint Identity Security Solution Show. My name is James Honey, your host, and joining me today is Christine Whitlock, Senior Manager of Product Management. Christine, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me, James.
Absolutely. I'm super excited you decided to join us again because obviously we're at Navigate this year, so this is very exciting. We had a lot of great product announcements and some really big ones for Identity Security Cloud that I'm really excited to talk to you about today. So let's go ahead and kind of get into it. One of the big announcements was dynamic access roles. So can you kind of explain to our audience what exactly are dynamic access roles and how are they different from like traditional roles that a lot of people know and understand?
Yeah, absolutely. We're excited to announce the release of these dynamic access roles. It's a new way to be able to model access that's a bit more flexible than our traditional role model. Traditional roles, you either get all of that access that is composed in that role, and it's assigned to a set of people that meet that criteria. And it's either you get it all or you get none of it.
Right.
And with the dynamic access role concept, we are adding this flexibility with what we're calling dimensions. And so you've got a base role that has access that everyone that should have that role gets.
Right.
But then these dimensions add a layer of flexibility where, based on certain criteria, only a subset of that access will be provisioned to the identities that have that role.
Okay.
And so it accounts for a lot of nuances that organizations in reality have.
Right.
I think there's three major benefits to it. It can really significantly reduce the number of roles that you need to create. Now, you'll have roles that have multiple dimensions on them, but in terms of the number of roles that you have to create and maintain, it'll really reduce that count.
Right.
And then also it creates this relationship between the access that is granted in these dynamic access roles, as opposed to in a traditional role model, you're having to create a bunch of individualized roles that,
Right.
Quite frankly, it's hard
Yeah.
to understand
Yes.
if they're related or not. And so with these dynamic access roles, you can account for that variability, but also have that relationship between all of that access comprised within that dynamic access role where it's appropriate.
Yeah.
And then the third one is with these dynamic access roles, you can really hide some of that complexity from your business users and things like access requests and certification. So those are kind of three major benefits to these dynamic access roles versus the traditional role model.
So, and I think you touched on a little bit of this and love to kind of expand around those business problems that dynamic access role solve. Like you mentioned role sprawl. So can you kind of go in a little bit about those business problems a little bit, or maybe even a little bit about role sprawl itself?
Yeah, so we talk to organizations a lot, and a lot of them have that problem of they have almost an untenable amount of roles to have to manage over time. It just has, if you have to create a set of access that is maybe very, very similar, but nuanced due to the variability of job positions based on things like location, position, you're having to create one role for every single combination of access and variability. And so that just causes the number of roles for an organization to grow and grow, and then it gets to a point where it's pretty unwieldy.
Yes.
And so that is really the business problem that we're trying to solve for with these dynamic access roles.
I think we were in some meetings this week at Navigate, and I think I heard one customer was talking about they had times where it was one role for one identity. Mm-hmm. That was crazy.
Sometimes more.
More. Mm-hmm. So just building a role for one identity that's a lot.
And then it makes it hard for the organization to understand even which access is related to what.
So, exactly.
Yeah.
So obviously we're talking about large, complex roles, number of roles. What this new capability, how's it suitable for different types of Identity Security Cloud customers?
Yeah, so, it might not be for every single Identity Security Cloud customer, but we talk to a lot of different customers with kind of large distributed enterprises that have some job positions that are very, very similar, but just not 100% exactly the same access. And so that really crossed verticals, it crossed industries. So consulting, retail, banking, healthcare studies, where you can imagine that there's a little bit of variability in that access based on certain context. It really was pervasive across different verticals and industries.
So with that, speaking of verticals, I was wondering if you can kind of give us like a real world example of, like, as we all know, we see it, we kind of understand it. I know for me, it took me a minute to really okay, what does it do now? Until I saw like a good example of that.
Yeah.
If you give us a good real world example.
Yeah, so the example that we've been using to explain this, and it's a pretty simplified way, but try and stay with me, is that think of a college campus faculty access. Based on the fact that they're faculty, their campus branch that they're located at, their position, and then the combination of their campus branch and position, all of those have a mapping to certain access. And based on those 4 components, I mean, that's a role per combination of access that you're having to create. This is overly simplified.
But imagine it at scale.
And imagine it at scale. So with dynamic access roles, what you could do in that situation, one possibility is that you have one base role for all of your faculty, and then your dimensions would say, based on this campus branch and this position, you can get certain access, it meets certain criteria, and then is mapped to a subset of access that those
sense.
Folks should have. And so it really greatly reduces that number of roles you have to create. Granted, again, you're creating dimensions in replacement. But an administrator will be able to kind of only have to make changes on that single role's dimensions if anything else changes.
No, that makes total sense. That's a good example. That's the example I heard from your team, and I was like, okay, that helps really bring it home, because you kind of understand those examples. And to your point, companies can be different, but they have a lot of different permutations when it comes to access and roles and job titles and what they do and where they do it. So
absolutely,
that's really good. So I want to kind of end it. This is always a question we ask, is kind of what's next? What are you thinking about with dynamic access roles? As obviously we just announced it here at Navigate. So what are we looking for with the future with them?
Yeah, so with our first initial launch, we are focusing on being able to assign these dynamic access roles via birthright assignment. But we've already heard in our research, and our early adopters are saying they want to be able to support these dynamic access roles in access requests. So to be able to request these dynamic access roles within the Identity Security Cloud Request Center via the UI or the APIs, if you have an integration with a different interface. And so supporting that via access requests is definitely a next step that we're looking into. And from a certification point of view, we do support the dynamic access role certification at that role level, just like any other role. But with this dimensionality, we know that customers are going to want that to be another decision point in access certifications, is to be able to review those dimensions and the criteria and access that's granted via those dimensions. And then also looking perhaps even further, I mentioned that dynamic access roles really provides that visibility into the relationships between the kind of that base role and then the dimensions, and we really see that as an opportunity to leverage AI to suggest the access based on that new relationship that we're able to capture with these dynamic access roles.
Awesome. Well, Christine, thank you so much for joining us. I know your schedule's busier than mine here at Navigate, so really appreciate the time.
Thanks, James, for having me.
Anytime. I want to thank everybody for watching, and remember, SailPoint Identity Security Solution Show is a one place you can go to learn about SailPoint's products, new capabilities, and solutions. So to learn more about dynamic access roles or learn more about our overall portfolio, join us at www.sailpoint.com. Thank you.